Just before we get started today, hey, I do Clash Royale strategies. If you're interested in becoming infinitely better at Clash, then hit me up with a sub so we can become pros together. Okay, thanks, enjoy the content, you absolute legend. Right, so without all the promo stuff, thank you for spamming my comments about the most wanted video I've ever produced. Why do I succumb to the two people that wanted this? Lord knows, but hey, Mortar is a deck that I could use research on. So after playing about 5 ladder games with it before wanting to retire and just cry, here's a video all about Mortar. First of all, let's take a look at the stats of this card. The damage on it is rather hefty, giving it the ability to one-shot up to princesses. Automatically, this means that anything with lower health than a princess is a rather ineffective counter. For a 4 elixir win condition, it has relatively okay interactions with troops of similar cost, especially when you take into account the health of this building. It has health that is similar to a goblin hut, meaning that only Rocket will actually take this thing down. If you do decide to use a different spell on it, make sure that you catch other units with the usage of that spell. Mortar has a really high tolerance to spells, so they're not really ideal to be using, seeing as though it only costs 4 elixir. Just for reference, that's a whole 7 shots that a Musketeer needs to kill it, although this gets reduced due to Mortar's lifetimer. This win condition is certainly no joke, and it will shred your tower if you just leave it, so immediate attention is required. Anyway, what about practically using this card? Well, its optimal placement is 1 tile from the edge of the arena and 1 tile away from the river. Moving it closer to the edge of the arena makes sure that more of the mortar's range is off the arena and not dipping into your opponent's other side. This means that opposite lane tanks will more often miss distracting the mortar, allowing you a cheeky lock-on. The center placement is rather simple, it's just in the middle right at the river. One of the best times to use this placement is once you've lost the tower, but still need to attack into the lane that you've lost the tower in. In this situation, using the normal plant means that your opponent can damage it from all 4 sides. Doing in the middle, however, means that your opponent can only access your mortar from the left or the right and the bottom, making it easier for you to predict their plant. It's now just a 1 in 2 prediction opposed to a 1 in 4 prediction, if that makes sense. Mortar is a card that is heavily influenced by its synergies. Overall, Mortar is a pretty average card, and so it's really reliant on the dynamic that it brings to cards paired with it. Classically, there are a few really good reliable units that help Mortars abuse towers. Knight has always been really good with Mortar because he has good health for just 3 elixir. He also attacks other units, which is important for the Mortar. Because the Mortar's DPS is just 44, it's not really enough to kill units that are threatening it. The same concept goes for archers. They're somewhat resilient and give out amazing DPS to help the Mortar with any targets trying to fight it. Lastly, Ice Spirit has always been a hero of siege archetypes. For just 1 elixir, he can slightly damage units and give you an also important extra second to react to anything your opponent wants to use on defense. Do you notice anything similar about these 3 cards, and in fact the Mortar itself? That's right, they're all commons. This is actually a feature that Mortar uses heavily when being run on ladder. Most Mortar decks will be 6+ common cards, allowing it to be a free-to-play dream. Once you practice with it enough and then have it all leveled pretty highly, you'll be able to push ladder a ton. Anyways, these synergies are totally different to Expo. Expo prefers cards like Ice Golem and Tesla, ones that are built for a longer serving push but offer less DPS than the Mortar synergies. This is where Mortar differs to Expo, the DPS of the 2 buildings. The Mortar hits very slowly, meaning that its overall DPS is pretty trash. This means that it sucks at 1v1 interactions. Most units will defend it for a pretty good trade. Why is Mortar still viable if it sucks that bad then? Well, it's because it's a chip archetype. Think of Miner. You never really send in a Miner and expect it to take down an entire tower, but it still works as a card because it will slowly but surely wear down that tower. Mortar is the same deal. If you cycle it hella fast, you can spam infinite mortars, and those pop shots will add up to a tower in a game. Expo more so relies on that one solid connection that it will get. Mortar is Expo, but in reverse really, but it makes for an interesting archetype nonetheless. Being Siege still has a few of the same fundamentals. Here's a quick throwback to my Expo video that I did like almost a year ago now. That's pretty mad. So I'm adding this audio clip in whilst I'm still editing this video because I realized I didn't really explain why we're going back to an Expo video, but essentially these are the 3 main ways that you can get damage with Siege, and obviously Mortar is Siege, so that sort of applies here. The first method is outcycling. You want to be selecting this when you know your opponent's deck cycles slower than yours. Best example is against a good Golem player. They for sure aren't putting Golem in the back as they know you'll easily punish it, so you want to be able to memorize their troops, the ones easier to get past, and get through those instead of the Golem. The second method is to know they can't afford that card. From the start of the game, practice counting how much you gain or lose in each trade. Knight plus Hog versus Minions plus Ice Golem, you know you just gained 2 elixir. Keep counting for all interactions and you'll soon know when they can't afford whichever card you're watching. Bear in mind, Expo has a 3.5 second deploy time though. This is enough for them to actually gain 1 elixir and so place a troop they couldn't previously afford. You want to be using this when your deck isn't actually equipped to counter their card. Best example, Rocket. No deck can counter this card, and it's very good against Expo. If you count and know your free elixir up, instantly get to 6 and drop the Expo. By the time it's deployed, they'll have a maximum of 4, not enough to rocket you out. They may spend cheaper troops here. If you can counter these efficiently, then your Expo is sure to take a tower. My third and final method is simply killing their counter before it has the chance to destroy your Expo. This relies on both of the previous skills, counting cards and elixir. If you can accurately predict what they're about to play, you can counter it before it's a problem. You want to be using this against decks that defend with ranged units. Don't go crazy and try to predictably fireball executioners, instead try to block the first few shots with a mini tank, then proceed to use your own range units or spells to take it out. This mini tank prediction allows your Expo to keep its full health and even dish out damage. As a newer Expo player, you may not realize how quickly troops will die to a log plus Expo. Logging even executioners can be effective. Right, I know I said Expo like a ton in that clip, but the same applies for Mortar really. You want to be looking for patterns in your opponent's play, and then adjusting your offense to it. They will always try to be using their most effective counter against your Mortar, so it will generally never change. Against things like tanks, you're able to outcycle them most of the time. With range units, it's easy enough to block them and have them die to your Mortar. There are a ton of different types of cards in this game, so let's just talk about hardcore matchups here. Bait tends to be a good matchup for Mortar. This is because of the splash damage given to you by a defensive Mortar. It really restricts how a bait player can actually play. Miner also tends to be a good matchup for Mortar, because Miner decks often don't run too many hefty units to block your Mortar attacks. Hog is a great matchup, because a central planted Mortar will counter the Hog and still get you damage on the tower. Bridge Spam is a weird one, but I would oftentimes say that it's a good matchup. Bridge Spam really struggles to block Mortars due to their units rushing into its minimum range, although I would call this matchup more even than a counter. Mortar decks are obviously even, and I don't even know what is in the script, obviously they're equal. Who even wrote this? Giant can be a difficult one, but it's definitely winnable. You can get the Giant into the Mortar's minimum range, and then get chip damage over the top whilst it's still killing the Giant. You can also punish a Giant player if they ever invest a Giant in the back. However, most pros will just stick to blocking your win condition with their win condition, hence being a counter to you. Expo is a pretty bad matchup, as head to head the Mortar gets absolutely ruined. RG is possibly the worst matchup out there. I would honestly give up and cry instead of actually fighting it. And the final one we'll cover is 3 Musketeers. This is a relatively easy matchup because defensive Mortars will ruin the muskets. Paired with your spells too, you should be relatively okay. Mortar actually has a lot of good matchups, it's just all dependent on which meta game we're currently in. Defensive Mortars, that's probably a thing we should go into. Defensive siege buildings are one of my favorite plays in Clash Royale. From just passing your opponent the play to actually getting mad value, it's such a toxic thing to do and I love it. For starters, it ruins spawners. Anything like a bar part will inevitably just die to the Mortar, slowly sniping it from your side of the arena. It's a great play to just obtain value when you're not in a position to play offense right now. Talking of offense, Mortars only actually need 12 hits to take down a tower. This fact is important to defensive gameplay because it shows the versatility. You can spam Mortars on defense and then just snipe down 12 shots to grant you a 1-0 victory. It's a great win condition in terms of versatility and is incredibly lenient to your mistakes. Mortar decks really come in 2 main variants at the moment, Bait and Cycle. Both of these will carry 2 win conditions, just in case they can never actually manage to get a Mortar through onto the tower. Cycle will usually run Rocket that it can cycle, and Bait obviously has its bait cards or sometimes a Miner. These decks are totally different and can oftentimes even incorporate different skill sets to them. I much prefer the Cycle version because I'm not a fan of Miner bait decks personally. Really, neither one is better or worse though. Cycle will be better for most players on ladder, but Bait is 100% better in challenges. It sort of is game mode dependent in a way, as the Cycle deck is easier to level and will work when underleveled, whereas Bait is a little bit harder to level but will not work when underleveled. So yeah, I think that's all I really have for Mortar. In a way, it's just a smaller version of the Expo. It prefers to chip and cycle opposed to getting one connection and winning that way. This can make it seem somewhat more annoying, but hey, everything about this game is annoying to be fair. As for comment of the day, this one comes from the latest free-to-play episode, Nice Person, or just maybe Nice Person, maybe it's a silent K like knife, I don't know, it's really irrelevant to the video, isn't it? Alright, well, I'm back from the future again, because YouTube demonetized the original recording of this video because I said a bad word, and yeah, we're sort of having to re-record this outro to cut it out. So essentially, the comment from Knice or Nice Person was, can we redo the Arena Free Challenge? It was like a speedrun I did. I'll leave a link to it in the top corner if you haven't seen that. Because Witch was moved, and that was the card that's giving us a lot of issues. And my answer to that is, maybe? Like, I'm down, but I just gotta find some time to do an actual stream and set it all up again, because yeah, that was a lot of effort. But yeah, we'll see about that one. But yeah, that's all I have today for Mortar. Thank you all for watching once more. If you haven't already, then make sure you subscribe and all that, but like 70% of my audience are already gone by this point, so it's pretty redundant saying it now. But yeah, anyway boys, peace.